Welcome back to Writing Women, the show where I talk about the women who exist in fiction and the people who created them. This week, I am finally going to finish the Circle of Magic Quartet by Tamora Pierce by reading Briar's book. It has been a minute since my last video. Some of you who watch my stuff pretty regularly may remember in my Daja's book episode me mentioning that my dog was sick. And unfortunately, 2 days after I published that video, he did pass away. It's been roughly a month of me trying to let him go, but I think I'm finally at a point where I can at least start uploading again. He was nearly 12, so it wasn't the biggest surprise in the world, though it did hit pretty hard because it happened really suddenly. He got sick, and a week later he was gone. So there won't be any more of him panting and wandering around in the background of my videos. With all of that going on, it was really hard for me to even read Briar's book. As some of you who have read it before already know, it is about a plague. This, of course, is pretty topical right now because we are experiencing our very own plague in the real world. It was also weird because I was trying to nurse my dog who was sick and had a really high fever while I was reading about all of these people dying of a really high fever. So at a certain point, I just had to put the book down. It took me a few weeks, but I was finally able to finish the book and get my thoughts down for the video. So here we go. I'll start off by saying that this book really is the standout of the quartet, closely followed by Daja's book. It tackles social issues that I rarely see so thoroughly talked about in adult media, never mind media aimed at this age group. The writing is tight and poetic, as always for this series, and every single word is dripping with meaning. I will go ahead and recap the story, and then we can go from there. Rosethorn is traveling to Summersea with some of the children in tow. Sandry wakes Briar from his nap to pester him about choosing a birthday. Everybody else has one, and she feels that it is important for him to choose one so they can all celebrate it with him. He doesn't have any memory of his real birthday, though. They arrive in the mire, the poor district of Summersea, to deliver medicines to Erda's house. That is the place that the people of the mire can go for the cheapest health care possible. Briar looks for his friend Flick. She is a local of the mire, and she doesn't show, but her friend Allie Pup does. Flick has sent Allie Pup to look for Briar in the hopes that he will come and help her because she is very sick. Briar joins Allie Pup on a quick journey through the sewers to find his friend. As soon as he arrives, he realizes that this is a bit beyond his abilities, and he calls for Rosethorn. Flick is sick with some kind of blue pox, and Briar knows that that kind of thing is usually contagious. When Rosethorn looks Flick over, she knows what Briar does not, that this illness is very dangerous. She and Briar must bring Flick to quarantine at Erda's house. Briar uses his magic to connect Rosethorn to Sandry and Triss, who then connect to Nico so that Rosethorn can tell Nico about everything she's found out. The Duke then sends some special guards to deliver the trio to Erda's house in a special quarantine vehicle. They also begin searching the mire for more cases of the pox. They settle into the quarantine room by shedding their garments and bathing. They get Flick to do the same and even try to get her to eat a little bit after they collect some fluid samples. They mask up to avoid infection. Girl, get down. Hey, cat. Don't you meow at me. Triss is upset that Briar and Rosethorn aren't coming home, and she lashes out, saying that they shouldn't have been in the poor district of the city trying to heal people that were no better than animals. Lark reprimands her and tells her that when she got sick and couldn't be a tumbler anymore, she had no choice but to live in the mire, and that people who lived in the mire wouldn't be poor if they could afford better health care. Later on, Triss apologizes to her, and Lark tells her that she needs to remember that her sharp tongue cuts, and that she shouldn't let her grief make her cruel. Rosethorn and Briar exhaust themselves treating patients as they arrive and are joined by another Winding Circle healer, Henna. Eventually, the new cases grow so numerous that the quarantine room is opened. Erda's house is packed full. Patients can't leave their floor, but healers are allowed freedom to roam. Rosethorn's strength seems to be fading, and Briar is worried for her. He has Triss bring a load of plants from Rosethorn's workshop, and while she sleeps, places the plants around her. The effect is almost immediate. She wakes from her sleep feeling a little bit better. Briar personally sees to the treatment of Flick. He sees that the healers seem to be passing her by and winds up holding her in his arms while she dies. Dedicate Crane at Winding Circle has managed to develop a diagnosis oil to tell if somebody has the disease. Rosethorn uses it on herself and Briar, and when it shows that neither of them are infected, they leave the quarantined Erda's house and go home. Crane has been working with a large crew of assistants to try and find a cure, and he comes to beg for Rosethorn's help. She tries to deny him, but he keeps pressing. Briar tells Crane to go get a great mage to help him, and Crane is shocked to find out that none of the children realize that Rosethorn is considered a great mage. For that matter, so are the rest of their teachers. Rosethorn finally agrees and brings Briar with her to assist Crane in developing a cure. Crane is notoriously finicky and dismisses his assistants for slight errors. All of the assistants make bets on how long it will take for new people to leave. When he dismisses his scribe, Briar suggests that they bring Triss in to help transcribe the notes that they need taken. Crane agrees after a little bit of pressing from Briar and Rosethorn, and quickly comes to rely on Triss because her note-taking is so good. Briar and Triss figure out that the essence of the blue pox has magic in it, which explains why it's taken so long for them to be able to figure out the disease. Nico takes Triss into the sewers with him to work a spell to trace the magic back to its source from the first known case. They follow it through the sewers and up to a house where Triss gets to test her new lock-picking skills on the door. Briar has taught her how to pick locks in exchange for her teaching him how to read and write. What they find is the workroom of a poor and also dead mage. Using a spell to watch past events, they see the mage fail an experiment, check their coin purse, and decide to go and dump the failed potions in the sewers instead of taking them to Winding Circle to have them neutralized before being disposed of. Nico is furious because he has already figured out exactly what happened, which is that something in those potions reacted with the sewage and caused the blue pox. They find the mage's workbook and return to Winding Circle with it. They discover that the mage was working on a potion for weight loss that would cause a fever to help burn fat from the body, and the fever would be resistant to willowbark tea, so that the first time you drank willowbark tea for the headache that the potion gave you, it wouldn't get rid of the weight-reducing fever. Which is why the pox's fever is so deadly, because it's resistant to the one thing they usually use to reduce it. With this new knowledge, they begin making huge strides in unlocking a cure for the disease. Though unfortunately, one day during their work in the greenhouse, one of Crane's more careless assistants nearly drops a tray of the essence. Rosethorn catches it without thinking, and some of the pox essence spills out onto her gloves and gown. She doesn't think any of it touches her, but, of course, she's wrong. She catches the blue pox and has to be sent home to her sick bed in discipline. Briar and Triss continue their work with Crane, knowing that the best way to help Rosethorn is to help them find a cure. The work for a cure is now frantic. Without Rosethorn, the only person capable of this work is Crane. So they need to develop a cure before he catches the pox by accident. Eventually, a cure is brewed, and Crane personally gives it to Rosethorn. Though she still seems sick, they think pneumonia. All the healers are busy administering the cure, and no one is able to come when they think that Rosethorn might be dying. Lark runs off to try and find Moonstream, but she's in the city. Briar is sitting with Rosethorn, and he feels her slipping away from him. When he feels her dying, he dives after her with his magic. He follows her into the Kingdom of Death while tethered safely to the real world by Sandry and the other girls. He makes his way through an empty city, following what he knows to be a thread of Rosethorn's power. He finds her overlooking a wild garden in need of taming, and she freaks out on him. She insists that he go back, and he refuses. He says that his place is with her. She argues that she's dead, and he is not. They have a pretty emotional scene where Rosethorn tells Briar that she loves him, and he begins to cut the rope binding him to the world of the living. Rosethorn and the girls try to stop him, but he keeps going because they have their teachers, and he wants to stay here with his. Rosethorn finally agrees to return with him to the land of the living and promises to make him regret it for the rest of his life. They return to the physical world, and Moonstream is there now, and she's pretty angry at what just happened, but she's also kind of in awe of what the children just did. They not only brought Rosethorn back from the dead, but they also burned away the sickness that was in her lungs. Moonstream asks the kids not to tell anybody about what just happened, because she's really not sure what just happened herself. Rosethorn has lost the ability to speak due to a seizure, but she should be able to recover. Briar finally decides on a birthday, and the story ends. So, I opened this video with a quote from Rosethorn, and that's where I'd like to begin my discussion as well. If you visit Tamora Pierce fan spaces at all, you've probably seen that quote a lot this year. We are, of course, in the middle of a pandemic, and Briar's book has been a pretty hot topic of discussion. It so accurately shows how a disease can spread and decimate an entire city that it's impossible to not draw parallels with our current timeline. Though my suspension of disbelief is gone when Rosethorn tells people to wear a mask for their own safety and to stop infection, and they just do it with no argument. This is by far the darkest book of the series, while still somehow managing to stay in the realm of fiction aimed at young readers. Tammy doesn't shy away from the horror of death and disease. She just trusts her younger readers to understand it as a part of life, and even trusts them to understand it as a part of this wonderful, magical, fictional world that she has built. There's a story thread about Briar losing Roach, the boy that he used to be, and becoming the mage student that he is now. He struggles with the knowledge that he's a totally different person now, one that the old him may not even recognize. One aspect of this thread is his speech. He frequently falls into the pattern of street talk that he was raised speaking. And of course, every time he does it, one of his teachers will swoop in and correct him. It's usually played as a sort of joke, but it also shows the reader how even our heroes of the children's teachers can discriminate against people. Rosethorn says that Briar should talk like a real person at one point, but he and Flick think that he always talks like a real person. But of course, if you don't speak like you've been educated or like you have money, you're not a real person. This is, of course, not something confined to the fictional world. And it's gotten so much worse since the internet rolled around. Every comment section or thread on every website has some pedantic jerk who's jumping in to correct someone's spelling or grammar or punctuation in lieu of any actual contribution to the discussion. It's really refreshing to see that kind of educational elitism represented in fiction, so maybe a reader can work out for themselves that you don't need to speak a specific way to be considered a real person. On the subject of speech, there is another really great quote in this book that I absolutely love from Lark, and it's the part where she tells Tris that she needs to remember that her sharp tongue can cut people. That is advice that I need to have tattooed on the inside of my eyelids, personally. It is so valuable to show an adult just calmly shutting down the casual cruelty of their charges. She's not mean about it. She doesn't yell and scream at Tris because she said something mean. She calmly shuts it down, explains why it's wrong, and then later on, when Tris comes to apologize to her about it, she gracefully accepts the apology and sits and talks with her. And I think it's equally important to even show the fact that Tris apologizes. See, that's what people mean when they say flawed characters. These characters all make mistakes based on their various backgrounds and temperaments, but they rarely go very long before they go to the person that they hurt and apologize for it. I don't know many adults who feel comfortable just apologizing for things like that, because since I was very young, I just kind of learned through watching that apologizing was coded as somehow losing. Like if you apologize to someone, then you have to admit that you were wrong, and if you admit that you were wrong, you've lost. So as long as you don't apologize, you don't admit that you were wrong, and so you can still win. And that kind of belief just creates lasting harm all around. That's all I really have for Briar's book. I'm sure there's more that I'll probably talk about later on when I get into the Circle Opens, but like I said, it's been really hard just even getting this video out as is. I'm really sorry it took so long to get this episode out. I should be through the worst of it right now, and I will be back to my regular upload schedule. I shouldn't go longer than 2 weeks without an upload anymore. Special shout out to my patron, Ms. Psycho, for sending me a cuddle clone of Loki, so that even though he's gone, I can still have him with me. Just gonna set him on the bed next to me so he can sit with me while I do my recording. It is spooky season now, so in between now and when I start the Circle Opens, I will be doing some more vampire books. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please go ahead and like the video. It really does help me out, and if you want to see more, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And if you want to get some neat goodies like behind-the-scenes stuff and early access to some of my content, then head on over to my Patreon at patreon.com/writingwomen, where you can subscribe for as little as $2 a month. Thank you to my current patrons, Mary Doc Brandybuck, Ms. Psycho, Amy Chu, aka the Doctor, Lord Butterbutt, and Bruce. I am busy. I cannot play with you right now. No, stop. 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 Cat, stop it.